I wrote the book in 3 months. I found that really easy. The editing bit,
She's a HR and career strategist with over 2 decades of experience. She wrote her #1 best-selling book, Hired, to empower parents to support their young adults in getting their first job. And today, she's on the show with us, sharing exactly how she did it and what surprised her the most on the journey. Heather Rybaruk.
Every chapter has to work on its own. So it's almost like, like mini ebooks. And my first chapters, looking back, were dreadful because there's so many stories to share over the years. What will relate to these parents? AI is such a great tool to use. And I teach people, I must be every day, I talk to people about AI. So I was just like, I could do this.
Heather, welcome to the Inspired by Show.
Thank you. We got here.
So good to have you here after spending months and months and months working on your book together. I'm so excited that it's here behind your shoulder and you're here. And it's just, it's all happened.
It has.
So welcome to the show. Great to have you. Now, Heather, obviously we're going to talk about your book. We're going to talk about you and how you came about publishing your #1 best-selling book, which no doubt we will go into detail on. But you're known pre-book, you were known as the HR and career strategist. So I know you've got quite a big background in that, but tell us about how you kind of got into the HR and career world before the book kind of came into existence.
So I kind of did the corporate thing for many years and started really young. So I think my first senior role was kind of 21, which is crazy. So, and I realised really early on that you need a great team around you. And in order to do that, you need to understand people. So, and that you can't do everything yourself. So actually you need to develop these people to make them better. So kind of that's where the talent side of it came. And then I progressed through senior roles into kind of, GSM, senior roles. But I was always the talent champion. The HR kind of, what do they call it, like divisional case, where they send you out to sort HR issues. So it always revolved around people. And I was so successful in my roles because of my team. So yeah, I loved it. Absolutely love it.
And so how did you then go from being in the corporate world to now running your own business and obviously helping people get hired?
Baby. Timely, right? So I had my son Seb quite late on. So I was 38 when I had Seb and realised that actually there's more to life than work, which I didn't realise because I was just kind of, no, money and status, let's keep going. Everyone's like really driven, especially if you go into the big corporate worlds, that everybody wants to be the next RD or whatever. And I kind of, after Seb, just realised, no, there's more to life, actually, and it's more about a work-life balance. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure that out and a lot of self-development on how do I create a work-life balance. And I was really lucky. I worked for a really large corporate that offered me part-time working, first time. It was rejected when I first had Seb. But a new HR director came in and said, oh, we're all about the people, flexible working. I was like, well, let's go. So yeah, I was the first general manager that worked 4 days a week, which was amazing. But I still missed him. It still wasn't right. So then I kind of moved into a small business, like an SME that had been kind of established for like 40 years. And I kind of walked through their door in the interview and went, yeah, I've gone from that, but it's just all about work-life balance. So I kind of went in as their HR. And then that kind of opened the door to small businesses. I just couldn't believe how little resources they had in their small businesses because I was just spoilt. I had all the best training, leadership training. I worked for kind of, large courses like Whitbread, things like that, where the training was just second to none. And I kind of walked into these small businesses and there was nothing. And I was like, so how do you retain your team? And they were like, well, we just do. And it's like, do you develop them? And it's like, well, we want to. And I'm like, should we fix that then? And then it was just, it was amazing. Like just going in and making a difference. And, it was a small IT company, which was great. So quite binary and quite geeky. So I used to say it was like 90% NASA, 10% comic relief. And that was me. I was the comic relief, right? But it was just, we had so much fun, and it was just kind of really making somewhere that you want to stay and work. And then the pandemic happened, which, small businesses just started reaching out. Like, I don't know what to do. Infectious disease policies, people are like sick. They don't want to come in. Do we have to have jabs? Do they have to? What happens if they don't want to? And so I just started helping small businesses. And then that then led on to people losing their jobs. So it all started with Karen Matthews. She was in HR. She said, I've sent 100 CVs and haven't even got an interview. And I'm like, I don't know who you are, but just send me your CV. Like, let's see if we can help. Her CV was great. It was okay. But all we did is made a few phone calls, and within 3 weeks she was hired. So then they were like, Heather, can you help someone else? And I was like, yeah, okay. And then it's like, oh, my business, can you help me with this policy? It's like, yeah, of course. And then it kind of just went from there. Mm. So, and then weirdly, somebody who needed a job, I introduced to a company that I helped. And I was like, oh, this could be interesting. So then I was like, okay, can I get into colleges? Can we get this early? So, especially with the company I worked for, there was no succession. They kind of trying to bring people in that were already trained but couldn't afford those salaries. So it's like, well, you need to invest in talent. So I then started talking to colleges and then introduced them to businesses that I was helping. And then it's kind of crossed over. And then I called it randoms. It sounds so bad, but I hadn't helped some people in some industries. So I was like, if anyone knows anyone who needs help in this, let me know. So then again, within about 3 weeks, got them a job. Or introduce them to someone I knew in the network to say, oh, have you got any openings? Yeah, I have. Off we go. And then, so within 4 years, that kind of created, so 2 years ago, I started my own business. So I help small to medium businesses grow and scale through their people, recruitment being one, and then I help obviously individuals with their career and unlocking their talent. And then sometimes they cross over, which is just perfect. Heaven.
And you're such a natural at it. I remember when we were working on the book together, and obviously I run my own business. I hire a lot of people. I've kissed a lot of frogs, and I've got some fantastic people in the team, as you've worked very closely with, and they are incredible. And before that, I used to work in the corporate world. But my last ever career before I left and started my business was actually in the learning and development function in the HR team.
Wow.
And so when I was working with your book, I could relate to both sides of being the employer, but also when you're trying to recruit people and you're like, oh, come on, I just know you're like, you're in an interview and you really like the person. You're like, oh, you can be so great. What questions have you got for me? No questions. I'm like, please ask me a question. Just show me that you want the job. Like, ask me something. And so when I was going through the book, there were so many things in there that I'd never thought of, though.
Yeah.
That you've got this natural knack for understanding the people, understanding the process, and getting people hired, which is hence why the book is called Hired, because that's pretty much what you guarantee. You will be able to get someone hired if they follow this process.
But they've got to stick to the process, right? It's so funny. You, as we start our business, I'm sure you have been on loads of courses on how to do this and how to do that. And the person running it always says, stick to the strategy. And you're like, yeah, well, I don't want to post every day though, or I don't want to do this. So you don't stick to the strategy. So it's like some people are like, Heather, I only got step 3 and I'm hired. I was like, great. But, network for next one. Yeah, step 4, unlock your network, so stick to the strategy. But yeah, it's been so good being on both sides, like I said. And it's as recruitment and HR, what do I want to see? And then it's like, what do you need to show? And it is, like you said, putting the two together. And especially with the corporates, 21 days should be your recruitment strategy. Anything longer, you're going to miss out on prime talent. Fact.
Yeah.
So, and then for guys looking, 7 days, let's not look at anything older, 7 days.
Wow. Yeah. And I think one of the things I really loved about when we first talked about your books, obviously, Heather, you can imagine we get pitched a lot of people's books and a lot of people want to work with us and publish their book. And when we spoke about your book, one of the things I loved was the story of why you want to help kids get hired. And the connection with your own son. So tell us a little bit about why you decided to go down actually helping kids in colleges and so on to get hired.
So Seb's 8 now. He wants to be a professional football player, right? Obviously. And I'm saying to him, only 1%, less than 1% make it. And he's like, oh, no, I'm good. You know, he's already planned out that he's going to have a personal chef because he's not going to have time to cook. Because I keep trying to get him in the kitchen. And he's just like, I'm not going to have time. I'm going to be playing and training. And they're going to tell me what diet I need to eat, right? He's 8. And I was just like, okay. but it's something that they grow up so fast, you know, that I walked into school one day with his headmaster and he said, Heather, you know, what do you do? And I said, oh, I help, you know, people get hired. And he was just like, how do we do this with the next generation? He said, because all they want to be is YouTube stars, right? Or footballers. And I said, just talk to them about their passion. You know, like, what do they like? Where do they like eating? You know, what do they like wearing? You know, what are they into? And I said, that's the start. You know, I was talking to Seb the other day, literally, because he loves, am I allowed to say trademarks and stuff? Like, he loves Wagamama's, right? Loves it. Like, mini ramen, you know, he could eat every day. And I said, you know, your first job then, you could get a job in Wagamama's. And he's like, oh, I could get ramen, like, every day. And I was like, yeah, you could, right? So I said, you know, like, in holidays and stuff like that, it's about, you know, what do you love doing? So this headmaster was like, oh, God, really? And I was like, yeah. You know, there's so many, just because he might not get to be a professional footballer, he might be a coach, or he might, you know, start working in the club. It might be marketing. There might be something, but it's something that you love and actually want to do, you know, rather than, as you know, I think that you asked me, why did I start this book? And it was, you know, 69% of parents pick your child's first job, right? And I'm like, ooh, that's, you know, quite a big, you know, percentage. And how many go into a job they hate? And I speak to so many kids that like, yeah, mum got me this job. And I'm like, how did they get the job? And horror stories of, you know, the mum walking in with their CV, you need to meet my son, you know, etc. And I'm like, oh, as an employer, cringe. You know, I talk about it like they're now an employee, you know, like it's that maturity that you need. But, you know, God, my mum was like, you know, off you go and do it yourself, which I really appreciated. And actually they looked at my CV, perfect, because, you know, typos everywhere. But these kind of next generation coming through they just don't ask for help. And I don't know whether it's all this social media where they can just search for stuff that they don't ask people that know. You know, I don't know what the disconnect is, which is why, you know, kind of going back to Seb, he's 8. We've got 8 years before he's looking. And I know that in kind of 6 years' time, I'm going to be in his school doing interview training and helping with CVs, because this kind of, I love it, you know, going in, finding out what the next generation want to do. They've got the most amazing ideas with no limitations, but they have no idea how to do it. Like, no idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when you told me that for the first time, you said, you know, he's 8 years old. I've got 8 years to help fix this. And I just remember thinking, what a beautiful mission that you're on, because obviously it's not just for Seb, you're going to do this, but all the kids and the students you're going to help before that. Because I really related when we were talking about the parents thing. And I remember in your book, there's a section about like, basically, you can get your kid hired, but your parent can mess it up too. Now, I just need to interrupt this episode to share with you something really, really exciting. What I often find when I'm interviewing these incredible authors on the Inspired by Show is that people often come to me and message me and DM me and say, Chloë, it's all great for that author, but I actually don't know where to start. I don't know how I should actually write a book, or how do I even pick what book to write? Now, if that sounds like you, then I've got something really exciting I want to share with you. We have our Book Writing Secrets online program, which is designed to help entrepreneurs just like you know exactly how to write your book, plan the structure, pick which book that you're going to write, and look at the publishing options to get it out there and launch it without spending thousands and thousands of pounds and without a huge following. And we've created this in an 8-part mini series. So it's not a huge amount of time you need to invest, but it has all the little secrets that we normally keep just for our authors. And so if you want to learn how to write your book, learn how to publish it, get it out there, and actually get a book that sells and build your business and your authority, then the Book Writing Secrets program is for you. So if you want to find out more, click the link in the description, and I cannot wait to hear how you get on with your book. You know, and I remember interviewing people, because we had the company I worked for, we were big on young recruits. So I was 18, my first job, and we always recruited young, and it was like, let's just nurture our talent and so on. And the amount of people that I'd interview, bearing in mind, I had been in their shoes 3 years before that. So I was like, come on, you've just left school. You're not going to university. You're going to be great. And I'd be like, so why do you want the job? And they turn and go, oh, because my dad said I should have this job.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, I get it if that's true, but say something else. Like, why else do you want this job? Your dad's not the one going to the job every day, right? And I think parents can really mess it up. And I think that's why I love, as a parent, hearing your story of Seb, of how you don't want to be that sort of parent and you don't want anyone to be. That's why Hired exists.
But I was like, really, because I was, money and status. That was kind of, my dad started his own business and did really well. So I think it was kind of instilled, you need to be successful, right? But what does that look like? And I didn't, everything I did, he would still go, oh, you'd be a good air hostess. Or, and there's me running like a £17 million business. And he's like, I still think you'd be a good air hostess. And I'm like, like this, but that's their perception. What is the parent's perception of success? Right? To me now, happy. I don't care what Seb does. I don't. Like if he's happy and he's got enough money that gets him what he wants. I mean, he's obsessed with Aston Martins, right? So that's, at one point, I think he was 6, and he's like, I don't think I'm going to buy a house. He said, I'm just going to buy like an Aston Martin. I'm going to live in it. I'm going to go swimming and have showers. And I'm just going to eat Wagamama's. And I was like, sounds good. I guarantee there's someone out there doing it, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, they have all these different ideas. Like they're so different to us, And the way that the work environment is evolving, 5 years from now, we don't even know what's coming.
Definitely not.
We don't.
And that's one thing with your book is quite different, because your book also teaches the kids about how to use technology and not putting people off from AI, not saying, don't use AI. You're all for AI. You're like, artificial intelligence is going to be game changing for this. Let's leverage it.
Spot on.
And you teach it a lot in the book.
Massive. Yeah. So it was funny when we started writing, you said like, you talk about AI a lot, Heather. And I was like, yeah. I mean, somebody said to me once, it's a complementary tool. Do you know what it is? Because you have to have integrity. I was on Facebook yesterday and somebody put, I'm at the stage of acceptance for this job, but I've kind of exaggerated my CV. And now they're asking for proof of roles. And she's like, I can't do it. And everyone's going, oh, just keep going. And I'm like, no, that's integrity, right? With anything, you have to have integrity. So, AI is such a great tool to use. And I teach people, I must be every day, I talk to people about AI. And they're like, Heather, you just blow my head. You have blown my mind of what you can do. Because, I helped, I think I told you, he's in his 3rd year at university, and he wants to work with satellite debris in space, right? I'm not an expert. But I said, what course are you doing? What modules are you studying? Or, just give me the course title. Let me see if I can kind of bring up something for your CV. So anyway, just brought it up, and he was just like, that's like 90% accurate. And he's like, how did you do that? I was like, yeah, I didn't. I didn't. And then, when we start looking at, okay, who do you want to work for? Have you got any companies? Like, yeah, right. Well, let's get on, LinkedIn and let's have a look. And then weirdly, again, this comes to network. I knew somebody who knew somebody who recruits for space, right? In the space, and that they were like 100 miles apart.
Wow.
But that's the power of, what companies do, what you want to do. Here's a list. We then type it in. Who do we know who has any form of association with that? Let's make a couple of calls. Off we go.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that's really fascinating, Heather, about what you do is it's a combination. It's almost like a double-sided marketplace.
Yes.
You're like the Airbnb, but for recruitment, for hiring and kids, right? You've got the student and the child, and then you've got the business and the company. Now, I'd love to talk about the book side of this now, because obviously when we started working on your book, you already had the idea of what you wanted.
Yeah.
You could have written 2 very different books. You've written Hired, which is for parents to get their kids, young adults, hired in 6 weeks. And then you've got the possible companies of how to recruit, nurture talent. How did you decide which book to write first?
Oh, so hard. I think the biggest thing is I've gone on a journey in these last 2 years to every time I kind of turn the HR, off, it popped up, Heather, can you help? Like, and then every time I kind of turn the career off, it kind of, that then was like, can you help? So I thought, okay, let's just keep going. So I don't network huge amounts. I'm quite, I don't know, selective's not the right word, but I find it quite nerve-wracking standing up and trying to pitch myself in a minute. I got told off the other day because I only had 30 seconds and I was still talking. So I was like, sorry. I literally got told to sit down. I was like, sorry. But it's like, so I kind of, I stood up. Somebody said, and by the way, what I also do is this. And I thought, I've never really stood up in my network apart from trying to get T-level students work placements, or if I've got really great candidates and stuff, I might say, pull them aside and say, by the way, I do this. So I stood up in a networking and said, and by the way, I help people get jobs, right? It's kind of on the side. I've kind of helped in the pandemic, and it's gone from one person to now over 100 people, right? And I said, and a lot of times I help parents that need help with their kids or their nephews. Anyway, the meeting closed and I had a queue. I literally had a queue of, can you help my daughter? Can you help my son? Can you help my nephew? So I was like, yeah, no problem. So I thought, okay. So I went to the next networking and I did the same thing. And again, I had 7 people. So I was like, okay, this is really interesting. So we then started trying to market what I did, with trying to help people and CV checks and that kind of stuff. It was like tumbleweed, right? The only people that were engaging or buying any form of resources were career coaches, work coaches, parents. So I went, do you know what? If they're not looking, because again, like we said, the next generation, I don't think they know how to. They don't know what question to ask, right? Whereas the parents are so driven that they want them to do that I was like, there's only one way to do this. And it's probably to write a book for the parents to help. And this is where it's just gone off, because it's just like, I need this for my niece. I was at a networking event the other day and she's like, oh, I need this for my baby sister. Like my baby sister's just graduated. She hasn't got a clue what she wants to do. And I'm like, read the book, right? Yeah. What does she like doing? You naturally go into, what does she like doing? Where does she want to live? What does she, and they were like, I need your book. I was like, go for it.
There you go.
So yeah, so that's why.
Wow. And it's an interesting thing because obviously I was guiding you through the process and we worked together for months on it, and I could just see it evolve as you evolved as a writer as well, and as an author and so on. And I often find a lot of our authors are not right. They wouldn't call themselves writers. I would never have said I dreamt to become an author. Yeah. People say to me now, we've, published 54 best-selling books at the point of recording this, you being one of them. And I've written 2 books and soloed, maybe co-authored maybe 6 books, right?
Yeah.
I still wouldn't call myself a writer. Because that's not, I don't think most entrepreneurial authors don't want to be writers. They want to be game changers. They want to leave an impact. They want to build their brands. What was the journey like for you becoming a writer and an author?
We had some fun. You were like, oh. It was really hard because when you coach, it's somebody comes to me and says, can you help my daughter? And I say, yeah. What do they want to do? So they tell me what they want to do. So I go off on that tangent and off we go, right? So it was trying to be like, I don't want to call it vanilla, but, like, how do I help more without knowing specifically what they want to do? So that was really hard. And then, writing in the correct way was like, Heather, yeah, you're coaching. I was like, I am coaching, stop coaching, kind of, bring it back, and my first chapters, looking back, were dreadful. Right. I gave it to my husband to read through, and I gave him kind of like 5 chapters, and he was just like, and he said to me last night, he was like, yeah, you went on a journey. He said, because when you asked me to check it the first time, he's like, you might want to just, go back and, check the first 2 chapters again, because you evolve, like you said, you literally kind of, you get into it. And I loved it. I actually really loved it. I found it harder not putting everything in, and I probably I probably put so much in and we edited out. And I remember at one point there was like all these bright yellow big blocks of text to go, is this relevant? Should we leave this in or take it out? Like this, you know, like what do we do? Like, you know, and it's like how, because there's so many stories to share over the years. It's like, you know, what will relate to these parents? And that's what the amazing thing has come back is like, oh, so true with that. You know, it's like you were saying, like my dad's like, oh yeah, when I used to interview, that's, oh my gosh, yeah, that's so true. Like if they could just, what questions have you got? None. What do you mean none? You know, it's like, just here's 2 questions, right? That you could just ask that will open the door. And I was coaching at the job centre the other day, right? And this lady went, you know, I went for an interview and I got rejected. And I said, right. I said, did you ask any questions at the end? And she went, no. I said, okay. I said, here's 2 questions that if you get that again, I want you to ask. And she went, do you know what? She said, I got rejected because of a question that I didn't answer in the interview, but I had 3 years experience on it. So if she'd have asked that question, she could have talked about her 3 years experience. And she's like, she said, after the fact, I went back and just obviously said, I've got 3 years experience in this, but it was too late.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
about making the book relatable though, right? That's the bit that's the bit that I think a lot of people struggle with, because when you eventually get over the hurdle of, right, I'm writing a book, I always teach it like it's like turning a tap on. Yeah. Like at first you're like, oh, it's a bit stiff and oh, what am I going to write? And then suddenly you're in flow. And then before the end of it, you've got 40,000 words and you only need 25 or 30,000. You're like, oh my God. And as editors and as mentors, that's our job to go, maybe that we save that. Never delete. It can go somewhere else. It'll go on a blog post. It'll go on a social media post somewhere, you know.
We're getting there with social media. We're learning. We're getting there.
But it's quite a journey to go through that. And I remember saying it to you, and I say it to all of our authors we publish, the person you are when you start writing a book, you are such a different person by the end. So different. And so we would say, you know, don't have to feel like you're editing it as you go. Yeah. Actually, just write, get it out. That's the hardest bit. And then go back through, because then you're your own mentor. You look back and you go, Chloë, how did you ever say this was good? And I'm like, yeah, but it was good. The version you were then. Yeah, you know? Spot on. Now you've learned so much.
So supportive. Like, yeah, that's really great. Like this. And then I'm looking back going, God, no. Like, and my husband, it's so funny. He's like, you drive me nuts, because I just chuck everything out there, right? With no structure. There's no structure. There's no this. And I was like, do I even put it into chapters, right? And then they had like real issues with a bonus chapter, right? They had massive issues because it was like, it's not part of the step. And I went, no. But I talked about AI so much that you just went, you need to write a chapter on it. And I went, oh, yes. I was like literally like, oh, I'm so excited. And it's just like, okay, crikey, that's nearly a book. You know, like when I first wrote about it, that was almost a book. And I was like, okay, no, I need to refine that, because again, it's like, it needs to be relatable. It needs to be, if you've never done it before, or you've got a little bit. And I think the other thing was really good is you said every chapter has to work on its own. You know, so that really helped, because it was like, otherwise it would just be like, that needs to flow into that, and then that needs to flow into that. Actually, it didn't have to. So it's almost like, you know, like mini ebooks. Exactly, you know, someone said to me, like, you've written like 8 mini ebooks. I said, oh, have I? Yeah. Okay. But yeah, that kind of helped, that it had to work on its own.
And the reason why is because most people don't read a book cover to cover in one session. And so if we get to chapter 4, and they might have read chapter 3 6 months ago. Yeah. And if they open it and they feel like they've missed a step, they're going to feel like, oh, I'll have to read it another time. Yeah. You know, and it's a bit like, I mean, speaking, podcasting, they all have to work individually, because you could now pick up your book and go and do a talk on any one of those steps like that. Yeah. Because they work on their own.
Spot on.
Yeah. And obviously you've got your steps system. There was a lot of debate and weird discussion about whether we go with weeks or steps. Fascinating thing that I found, Heather, for you is 6 weeks was originally the plan of you can get someone hired in 6 weeks. But actually, the reason we've changed it to steps is because a lot of the time it happens faster than 6 weeks. Spot on. As well, right?
Oh, yeah. You know, the feedback is... So the book, 9 days. Yeah. Someone read the book in 9 days and got hired. So they've been out of work since May and read the book. And yeah, within 9 days, hired. Like 2 job offers. Wow. And a lot of this is when people struggle to get jobs, their confidence takes such a massive hit. And what tends to happen is they go the wrong way, right? So this is written for kind of parents, right? So school leavers and things like that. So a lot of that is there's so many soft skills that they can bring in, right? So I think I share in the book, I did like this employability workshop at college, and I took some students that I interviewed, and the lecturer took some students. And this girl's CV, she was like a world champion, like national champion horse rider, but she hadn't put it in her CV because she came second, right? And you're like, come on, right? So it's like all these soft skills and transferable skills, right? Is they've got loads, but they just don't know how to put it down. So we talk a lot about that. But if you have been out of work for a while, what happens is your confidence gets a knock. So you go the other way. So you go for lower jobs, right? Where I'm like, nah, you're going up, right? Because you're just going to get rejected for being overqualified. Oh, yeah, happens all the time. So I'm like, stop. Let's just go the other way, right? And that's kind of what happened. Is like, it was just like, but he was so, I could hear him on the phone to his wife. Like, she's told me she needs to do this. She's told me that I need to go the other way. And she's like, do it. And then, next thing you know, they want to fly me to Dublin for this interview. And I'm like, like this. And I said, they're like buses, right? I always say this, you won't get anything, then you'll get two. And the amount of times I have to write emails to politely reject, because you're so chuffed that you've got one job. It's like, stop. If you've got one job offer and you've agreed to go to another, go to the other, and then you've got choices. Yeah, life's all about choices, right? And then weigh it up. But and this is what happened. He was like, nothing. Then he got two. And now, he's sending me pictures of all this like posh stuff and amazing, awesome. Wow. But that's why I love it. I talk about it. It's like, I think, I love sport, massive sport. It's like a win. I just love when you get that email to say, I got it.
Yeah. And the impact it has on people's lives as well. The parents and the kids or adults, whoever's going for the job. And that's one of the reasons why I love publishing books, because similar to you, I get a buzz when our authors, I thought the first time my book ever arrived at my front door, comes in the package and I'm like, oh my God, my name's on this book. And you feel it in your hands and you're like, I got super emotional with my first book. I thought that was an amazing win until we started publishing other people's books and they get that reaction.
There you go.
The tears we see when we share the screen of the first cover for the first time and all this sort of stuff. And for me, that's why I love publishing books, because I feel like I believe in the author while they're writing it way more than they believe in them.
Yes.
Like there's a massive borrowing of belief going on. I'm like, come on, you got this, we wouldn't be here if you hadn't, Yeah. And I think that was a big thing for us with you, was seeing you go on the journey.
Yeah.
What was it like for you, which I know sometimes you feel uncomfortable talking about, but we're going to go there. What was it like for you launching the book and then becoming a #1 bestseller?
It's funny, I still squirm a little. And I say to you, like, I think I watched something of you, or did we have a conversation where it's not about me? This book is to help other people, right? So all this, so the kind of social media campaign was just awkward, right? Because I don't tend to get myself out there. People are like, Heather, you're like the best kept secret. And I'm like, okay, I should probably change that, right? And it does make a difference. And once it makes a difference, how can you get it out there to make a difference? So you have to step out your comfort zone, right? And it still doesn't flow off the tongue. I'm a best-selling author, right? But you talk about Seb, bless him. He took my book to show and tell at school, right? I know, right? And I was just like, okay, cool. And he's like, my teacher's going to buy it. And I said, oh, that's really cool, right? But then I had like his friends come up to me and went, you're world famous. And I said, am I? You sell on Amazon, right? So, I was just like, and then one of the other friends got home and said, Sebby's mum has written a book. And it's one of my really good friends. She went, I know it's here, right? I've bought it. I went, but turn it over. Like, there's a picture of her on the back, right? Like, her picture's on the book. Like this, it was like, I know, it's crazy. But they're like, they think I'm like world famous, which is, you've got to take that, and go, do you know what? I'm inspiring you that you could do that, right? So Seb's now writing a book. Seb's writing a book all about football.
Love that.
And he's like, mine's going to be in Waterstones and WH Smith's, right? So he's already, figured it out. But, he's structuring it. He's got pictures, and it's like, you kind of say who you're talking to, who's the book for? And he's just like, football fans, right? But he's there and he's typing it, and it's just, that's what it's about, it's like, and so my friend's son actually read it, he's 8, and he's like, I know all about CVs now. I know what I'm going to put on my CV. And I think, do you know what? If I can get to you at 8, good. This is awesome.
Incredible.
Right. And, I'm kind of that. It's really, you go to these like interview sessions. I don't know if you ever, so year 10, they go through these interview sessions, right? So you've got all these different corporates around you, going through, okay, so talk to me about this and this. I'm like practicing handshakes, right? I'm like, when you first came up, it's like, it's this weird thing, and they're wiggling their hands. I'm like, just try and sit on your hands and let's just practice that handshake. So it's like, I'm like so different. But you talk about like work experience, what you're going to do. I'm going to my old school. I said, why are you doing that? Oh, it's just easy. I said, but what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And they're like, well, I really want to go into this. I said, well, can you ring a couple of people to try and do that? And the careers advisor emailed me and said, Heather, 5 have changed their work placements. I was like, yes.
Yes, I'm on to a winner.
Spot on. Because it's like they don't, just make some calls. Who do you know that could do that? And it's things like, there's a big Polish community where we live, and they go to church. I'm like, congregation, who do they work for? How long have you been going there? And they're like, 5, 6 years. I said, do you want to ask any of them?
Yeah.
And they were like, didn't even think about it. And this is that, open the door, if I always say, like, if you can get one thing out of my book that gets you hired, it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And also the thing is with a book though, people always say, oh, what books have you read that have changed your life, right? Actually, the best book that you'll write, the best thing that will change your life is actually the book you write, not the book you read.
Really?
So for example, there'll be so many books that you've read that, or you will read in the future, I think this is great. But when you've written your own book, it opens so many doors for you.
Yes.
And even if you look at Seb, like you've inspired him now to write a book, and his friends and and all these people that have now got this belief.
Yeah.
And because it's one thing I found fascinating when I wrote my first book was like the amount of friends and family that could never tell you what I did as a business. They were always like, what does she actually do? And is she ever going to go and get a real job? And like all this shit that I would get. And then suddenly, as soon as I wrote my first book, I remember walking through B&Q back home in Jersey where I don't live. I was visiting family, and people were coming up to me because I'd written the book and I was on the cover of Globe Women magazine pretty much straight after because it opened the door to that opportunity. And I remember the people at Christmas time coming up to me in B&Q, the girls I went to school with, like, oh my God, you've written a book. How did you, oh my God, it's so great to see you. Can I have a photo with you? And I'm like, sorry? Yeah. Like we went to school together, and it's just, but everybody understands a book. Yeah. Everybody knows the authority that comes with a book. They value books. The fact that they know Amazon, they know Waterstones, and for entrepreneurs, it's just game changing for the journey. And you're only at the beginning. I'm so excited to see what doors it opens for you in the next few steps.
It's crazy, but it's funny. It's like you say that is one of my network. He went, you need to do a book launch. I said, I need to do what? Like this, and my husband's like, what do you do in a book launch? I said, I have no idea. Right. I said, but let's go. Local cricket club where we love, where we spend loads of time. Who do I invite? Right. And I was just like, I'm like, friends and family that kind of been part of it. And then I thought, do you know what? My family don't even know I'm writing a book. Right. So I kind of invited my family, and they were like, you've done what? I was like, yeah, by the way, I wrote a book. Right. And they were like, that's a pretty big thing. And I was like, yeah, it goes out on Amazon, right? In a couple of weeks. Do you want to come? And they were like, yeah, like this, right? But it's like you said, it is one of those, what do you do? Because you don't really tell people, do you? But that kind of puts it in perspective to say, yeah, and this is how it can help. Yeah. And like you said, this is now something that I can go to a school and say, by the way, I wrote this, right? It's a 6-step strategy. Do you have parents' evenings? Let me do a free employability workshop, right? Because the more people I can get to, and that's what it is, isn't it? How many people can I help? It's somebody said to me, it's like an expensive business card, and I was like, I think it's more than that. It's so much more than that. Is since the book, it's like, oh, Heather, can you help this? And it's like, yeah. I said, but I've written a book as well. So if you want to go that way, because sometimes the kids, you know, or the next generation are so nervous in talking to me. When they meet me, they're like, oh, this is so cool, right? Oh, you can do what? Oh, you can write my CV in seconds. I'm like, yeah, right. But again, it's that the amount of times of they need my help, but they don't know how to reach out, or they're nervous, or no, I'll be fine, you know, that kind of stuff. That book, and I did it, as you know, you can do it together. You know, with the parent, you can ask those questions together, right? So it's not all, here's the book, off you go. If you really want to drive your child's, you know, first job, let's make sure they like it, right? So some of the questions are, let's make sure they like it, you know, and what do they like doing? And don't put pressure on getting the job, like get the interviews. If they can land interviews, you're 1 in 3. And this is another misconception. People think hundreds of people get through to interview, and they just don't. As you know, you know, it's usually 3 people at the end.
Yeah.
So you've got a 1 in 3 chance of getting that job, right? And I go to things, oh, he didn't turn up to the interview the other day. And I'm like, what? You know, like, why? And then 9 times out of 10, it's because of the recruitment process. You know, they kept them waiting for 4 weeks, or, you know, so they lost faith in that company, which is why they were like, well, they weren't really bothered. You know, they kind of rang me up last minute. They'd had my CV for 6 weeks, and then suddenly, can I get in within 24 hours? And it's like, this is that crossover again. You know, come on, company, stop. You know, don't ghost people. The amount of effort and time they put into these applications is huge. And to not hear anything. Ooh.
Yeah, infuriating, isn't it? But it's the thing, all of the value that you've just shared that's in the book, they would never get from a business card.
No.
This is why when people say to me, I hear it all the time, a book is an expensive business card. And I'm like, bullshit. How many times people pick up a business card and go, oh my God, Heather, thank you so much. Your business card changed my life.
Yeah, spot on.
They can't, right?
No.
They don't say it, but they can with a book. And this is why, I mean, it takes you a lot longer to write a book than it does to create a business card, trust me.
Yeah.
But that changes people's lives, and anyone can have a business card, and not everyone can have a book. There's also people think, oh yeah, but everyone can have a book online. Do you know only 10% of experts actually publish books? So you're in the top 10% of your industry in career strategy and HR.
But that was the other thing, wasn't it? Like, there's no books. Like, we tried to find books, didn't we? You know, like, part of the homework you give us is go and find books in your category or whatever, right? We found 2, I think. Yeah. That's it. You know, so like it was like, oh, what? Yeah. So you go, okay, is there a need for this then? Don't know. But there is, you know.
But also now not a lot of competition. So the best thing for you now is you've stepped into that gap. And whether you feel comfortable there or not, you're now the go-to expert in that gap.
Come on.
So we'll get you on social media.
I know, that's it. That's the next step, right? So I do so much kind of, you know, I help with unemployment in Somerset, which is amazing. So like I'm an advisor for like SBA, and we help with that. So I can work with people, which is sponsored and grant funded, which is just, you know, heaven.
Wow.
To help with. And then now I kind of help 16 to 24-year-olds that want to start their own business. I mean, that is just, the ideas they have, you know, it's just no limits.
So fulfilling. And I'm sure you get loads of lessons from them as well as a business. You're like, I forgot about that bit, or I love their inspiration. I think that's the key with books and with all the stuff that you can get into. The more people you help, the more you learn as well. And, you know, there'll be people that will read your book that will go on to probably feedback, and you'll go, I didn't realize that strategy would help in that way, like the 9 days thing, you know. And I think it's such a journey that you're going on. So Heather, I'm curious to know, you've written the book, obviously business is booming as a result of it. What is next for you in your career and your business journey? We're
still going, right? I want to help. The first step was write the book. You know, I've helped hundreds of people. Now I want to help 1,000 people, right? So that's the next step. How do I help 1,000? And then it's like, if this gets, my dream would be to like open up like a charity, so I could just do this, right? You know, and get out there more. So we're in talks of trying to, with a similar strategy, but with there's something called the Gatsby factor, right, in school, where each school has to get to businesses and work experience and and interview training and stuff like that is like the Gatsby factor. So it's like, how can we help schools more? You know, like, how do we help them get a better outcome by delivering these factors? So I'm kind of working with apprenticeship businesses, local businesses, colleges, schools, like, just to see how can we make this better, right? Because it's like, I did those interviews, you know, for that interview day, and this girl, they get an extra point, right? Sometimes they get rewards if they bring a CV, right? Which I love. We love rewards. So I'm like, yes, great. But it was like this screwed up kind of piece of paper, right, where she'd filled in some bits and it had resilience in it. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Talk to me about your resilience. And she was like, oh, I was just told to write it. Because of COVID, I was just told to write resilience, right? And I'm like, oh, I was like, okay. It's like, you know, so you got a reward for bringing the CV, but actually you just tick the box, right?
Yeah. And you don't actually know what it means.
No. And it's like, that is where we're at, you know, and the careers kind of leaders and things like that, they're amazing, but they're not experts, right? They're not in the field. They're just trying to get businesses in to help them. And depending on who that is, you know, depends on what kind of interview you're going to get. Do you get what I mean? Where I'm all about, what do you want to do, right? And then I was at a career day the other day and she said, oh, I want to be an air hostess. I was like, amazing. Do you know what? I was looking at this for somebody else. And I said, you've got to get your maths and English, right? I said, are you on track to get that? And she went, no. And I said, right, this is that moment that you know, you've got to change this. If you're going to fail maths, you need it. And she was in with a group of girls. So I said, does anyone really good at maths in here? And they were like, oh, she is over there. I said, right, can you help? Can you help her with her maths? And she went, of course. I went, right. Off we go, right? But she was like, will you? And she was like, yeah, of course I will. Wow. But they don't know how to ask. Do you get what I mean? But yeah, there's how do I help? It's going to be one at a time, one school at a time, one college at a time. Yeah. Let's go.
And just as many people with your book in their hands to use as their guide, whether it's the parents or the students or even adults that are looking at.
And this is the thing, like, how do I get it to the kids? Ultimately would be amazing. If I can unlock the kids, great. But I think it is the parents that drive it, right? So if we can start with those, you know, like I said, school parent. There's quite a few parents. I didn't realise, you know, parenting, because it's all new. Like Seb's 8, you know, I'm learning school and homework and phonics, and you got all this to come, right?
I can't wait.
But I know, honestly, it's so cool. And he comes back with this report, you know, and teachers awards and things like that, which is just, it's so cool. But there's some stuff that you just think, God, if we talked about it earlier, you know, like we talk about budgeting, you know, step one, all about what do you need to earn? These kids don't know how to budget. I mean, there's people I know in different fields in my network that are trying to get that into school sooner. If we can do that, great, because we just don't understand the value of money. They don't understand it. So how do we get that in a bit sooner? And it's like I'm trying to teach Seb about pocket money and things like that early, but it's like,
it's hard. Yeah.
Spot on.
But that's the thing with teaching anyone anything as well. It's like, it's who does it come from and where are they learning it from? And one of the things that I always think about with our journey, whether it's with kids or in our own businesses or clients, you've kind of got to go back to what you remember at that point in time. Like, one of the things I love asking authors, which I'll ask you, is I can't really remember what it was like before I decided to write my first book, because I wrote my first book so long ago, five and a half years ago.
Yeah.
I decided to write a book 6 years ago. So it was such a long time ago. I can't really remember what I was thinking before. So when people say to me, oh, I don't know if I need to write a book, like, I want to grow my brand, I want to be known as the authority. From someone who's been there slightly more recently, what advice would you give to someone, or what would you say to someone who's an entrepreneur like you, so been in business a couple of years, wants to take their business to the next level and is maybe not sure if book is the right way for them?
Ooh, tough one. I think you have to look at what I always talk about, what problem are you trying to solve, right? So what value are you adding? And how can you add that? Is that an ebook? Is that a podcast? Is that a webinar? What is it in your industry that is a game changer that you do day in, day out? And this is where, you know, over 4 years, I developed this strategy. It didn't come overnight. But I was like, oh, hang on a second, that worked with you. I'm going to try it again, right? And then it came again, right? So if you're doing something on a regular basis, how can you get that resource or that, tool to them, right? So for me, it's 6, right? And it's pretty extensive. But some people, it could be, a webinar, sign up to this, but yeah, I think it's hard because it depends on the problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And then how are they going to,
how are they going to manage it and how are they going to make it their own?
Yeah.
How did you decide that a book was the way for you then?
The older I get, and I'm not woo and I'm not religious, right? But I truly believe things happen for a reason, right? So I was scrolling mindlessly through Facebook, right? and it kind of popped up with somebody that I met at Expert Empires. And he said, my really good friend, Chloë, is doing this 5-day book writing course, right? And somebody said to me, Heather, you need to write a book, right? And it all happened within a week. They were like, you need to write a book. And I was just like, oh, that's a lot, right? And then obviously it came up and I was like, shall I? So I came on it, right? Didn't I? That's how we did this. So I thought, oh, okay, I can do that. And it was really easy to kind of go through, like sometimes I'll do these 5-day challenges or these boot camps. I'm sure we've all done it, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes you're like that, I have no idea, right? And you're looking at the comments to go, oh, you've got your shit together, right? And I haven't got a clue, right? But with yours, I was like, yeah, but again, typical, it was everything, right? I probably had about 5 titles, right? And then you like refine it to this. What's your promise? And that was really easy to write. So I was just like, oh, okay, hang on a second. I could do this, right? And I think I wrote the book in 3 months, which is crazy, right? Because everyone's like, it took me 7 years or it took me 3 years. And I was like, I found that really easy. The editing bit, that is a whole new ball game, right? And I talk about it, in the book with my dad, but 7 hours, right? Like he went, like your editors went through it. He went through it again, 7 hours, right? Of Heather, that needs to be wrong. That doesn't make sense to me, which was great actually, because there were some bits that he was like, I don't understand that bit. And I was like, great, because if you don't understand it, the reader's probably not going to either, right? So it was, but yeah, that was the toughest bit. Yeah. But writing the book, absolute pleasure. I could have written, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 books.
That's also though because you had the right strategy. Like you talked about your strategy for your book. We've got such a clear strategy that we say to people, you will write your book in 3 months. And everyone goes, sorry? And I'm like, you will because of the strategy. It's when people get left to their own devices and they get, you can use the excuse of, I haven't got round to it. Where you've got us on your back going, where's the next chapter? Where's the next chapter? Having a publisher committed to them is a big step. And obviously you made that step quite quickly with the week of the challenge. And here we are. And now you've published a #1 best-selling book and you're going on to help so many people, which is bestseller. Yeah, definitely. There you go. She said it. So Heather, I said it. There you go. It's been so great having you on the podcast. It's been even better working with you over the last few months and just learning from you and seeing everything you've been doing. And it's just been so inspiring. So we've been so inspired by you today. I've got one last question I ask every guest that we come on the show. Who do you know that has an inspiring story or an inspiring book that we should have on the show next?
Crikey. Do you know what? I work, as you probably do, with so many people that have got such amazing stories. And something's always happened, which is why they've written that story. But none of them written books, right? I should send them your way. I'm going to send them your way. But I don't know if you've had him on here, but the one person that I love is Mr. Wicks, right? Joe Wicks, to me, is just the epitome of authenticity, being yourself, not really caring, getting it out there. I remember I saw him and he talked about how he used to stand at a train station, right, and give out flyers to people that just didn't want it, right? But he stuck at it. And I didn't know him, but lockdown, I started doing the Joe Wicks thing. And I was just like, I was like a mum, I was kind of like, I had the mum body, I can't do it anymore. And Seb and I started doing it. but he remained authentic, you know, and I'm sure he's probably written books. I haven't read his books, right? But
love that.
For me, authenticity is what it's about.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I think we must have been at the same event, because he was speaking at the event where we just started recording this podcast the day before, and I actually got to ask him about coming on the podcast. So yeah, definitely something that we'll see if we can arrange.
Honestly, yeah, I just think he's fab,
Yeah.
Absolutely fab.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Heather. It's been so great having you on here, and thank you for trusting us with your book. It's been an absolute pleasure, and here's to the incredible journey that you're on.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Excited. No problem at all. Well, hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of the Inspired by Show with Heather. What an inspiring episode. And so whether you are a parent who's looking to get your child hired, or you're thinking, as someone that's looking for a job or wanting to improve your career prospects, make sure you do get a copy of Heather's book if you haven't already hired. It's available everywhere. Just Google it, search Heather, and you'll find it, and we'll make sure we pop it on the description as well. If you are watching on YouTube and you haven't already, do make sure you leave us a comment. What has been the most inspiring part of this episode for you? Maybe you're an entrepreneur that's been on the fence about writing a book, or maybe you've been trying to grow your brand and you didn't even think a book would be the way forward. Then make sure you share in the comments what has helped you on this journey. Let us know, and I'm looking forward to having a read of all of your comments. Now, if you are listening on any of the audio platforms, or you're watching on YouTube and you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show so you don't miss our next inspiring guest. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Have a great one.